Hello, this is Scott Conway, PhD, JD with MothersRaisingSons.com, talking about parenting is leadership. Now, we already talked about be the example, explain the example you're being. We even talked about how to explain the example you're not being. In this lesson, I want to talk briefly about definitions. Now, in the program Holographic Immersions Definitions, we get into definition of man a lot as an example of kind of these immersive definitions. When you're talking to people and communicating, we talk about understand, define, be understood. Definitions is a key part of any communication, because if I use a particular word and you hear that word as meaning something very different than what I'm saying, that can completely transform your understanding. So I was having a conversation with my mother one time. We were going back and forth and back and forth. Now, in general, I would say my mother is a very wise, insightful person, that she is really not prone to making stupid arguments. But as we're going through this, and I'm realizing, okay, this is just getting to be stupid. Now, because I know my mother is a bright, intelligent, wise, insightful woman. And as we've been getting into this, I thought, okay, it is possible for any one of us every once in a while. You just get a stupid idea in your head. Happens to me. I'm sure it happens to you, because I think it happens to all of us. But as this has been going on back and forth, I'm thinking, okay, this is not making any sense. And so I paused a little while and thought, okay, now what would make this make sense? Because I know my mother is going to make sense. So at least from her own point of view, from her own premises, she'll be logical. So I have to figure, okay, what is going on here? And what I figured is that, maybe she's using this word differently than I'm using this word. And so I asked her, it's like, okay, something's not making sense to me. And I think I can figure it out on this word right here that we keep both using. What do you mean when you use that word? And she couldn't really give me a clean definition. So, okay, let me give you my definition. And I had a very clean two-part definition. It says, is that what you mean? He says, well, no, that's not what I mean at all. What I mean is something more like, and because she had my definition to start with, she was able to use that as a starting point to make her distinctions. And so, okay, so for what you're talking about, it sounds like, okay, I use this different word over here that I define exactly this way. And so she was able to say, okay, yeah, that's what I mean. So, oh, okay, well, in which case we agree. And it all came down to a use of vocabulary. So sometimes you have to just watch the way you use words, the way you define words. And in particular, when you're dealing with a boy, how you define boy, how you define men. Like when we say boys will be boys. So if I say that to any of our teenagers, any of our young people, and we even did this because someone was talking about the boys will be boys. Like, what does that mean? So, well, that means that, you face challenges, and that means that you kind of step up and keep trying to get better, and that means that you kind of explore stuff, and you're willing to face danger, and you're willing to step up and do stuff out in front of people to be judged and maybe to compete, and so that's what they were talking about. Well, other than when people say boys will be boys, they mean that they're going to do this bad behavior, they're going to mistreat the girls and all this stuff. The whole thing of, be a man being a bad thing. And I said, well, what does it mean to be a man? And you ask, our boys and say, well, it means you take initiative and you're responsible. So if I say, be a man, I say, okay, do you need to show more responsibility or do you show more initiative? And so they understand that's what that is. But some people think be a man means no crying and be tough and be cold. And sometimes, even be a little bit of a jerk and stuff like that. And he goes, that's not being a man. So to be a man, it's like the idealized knight. And the code of chivalry, I mean, maybe the way it actually played out and so much of it relating to battle and such, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about an ideal. And so when we're dealing with some of these things, understanding that, can you be gentlemanly and be a man? Of course you can. Duh. So what about being a man has to be being a jerk? Because if being a jerk, well, that's not being gentlemanly. And so our kids understand this because they have these clean definitions. And so you watch out how you're defining things. So if you're looking at like something that's gross and going like, oh, this is such a guy thing. Well, you're inadvertently teaching your kid that because he's male, he's supposed to like gross things and he's supposed to do gross things, and that if he doesn't, maybe he's less guy than he ought to be. Or if like to be a man, it's like, he's such a man, and by that you mean like, such a jerk or such an idiot or something like that. You're accidentally teaching your son that if he has to be manly, he needs to kind of be a jerk, and he kind of needs to do these things. The worst case I ever saw, a colleague of mine, didn't have much of a relationship with her. Otherwise, I might have tried to see if I could do something with this. But I had her son. She had brought her son to me because, trying to kind of work with your own kids can be challenging. Well, one of the things I found out is that in her coaching and counseling, one of the things she always said is, all men are ADD, all men are liars. Well, her boy was growing up and he wanted to be a man. Well, what had he been hearing his whole life? The definition of man is ADD, liar. Can't pay attention, shouldn't tell the truth. And when she brought him to me, her biggest complaint is, he doesn't pay attention, I can't get him focused, I can't get him disciplined, he's lying to me. And I realized pretty quick, it's like, you realize you're teaching him to do this. You're telling him, if you want me to see you as a man, you need to lie. If you want me to see you as a man, you need to at least, show up as ADD. So just be careful of the definitions and how you define things. And just try to listen to yourselves, like, what am I really saying, and is this really what I want to say? Because for us as adults, we know what we mean. There's a whole history behind our vocabulary. Now, if you've gotten far enough along in your membership that you've gotten the holographic immersions definitions, that will be enormously helpful to you. That is one of my highest level premium programs. That's why by itself it's a $500 program. It's a huge deal. Or if you've got the Ultimate Values Workshop, being able to get into those. And one of the things I talk about in the Values Workshop is getting the definitions. What do you mean by some of this stuff? And the definitions are so key. And while we as adults might know what we mean, and we might be able to gauge stuff from context, that our kids kind of learning this stuff, trying to systematically internalizing stuff that we're saying, they might not be quite as sophisticated as this as adults are. And so we want to be a little bit cleaner and a little bit more careful with our kids. This is Scott Conway, PhD, JD, with mothersraisingsons.com.